Hey guys, thank you for joining me again at Completing in Christ. We continue to look at this passage in the book of Joshua, found in Joshua chapter 24, where Joshua says, man, you got to decide. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. But it's time for us to decide. And he looked at him, he says, look, there's some things I just want that remind you of. Now, remember, he's talking to the people that he was leading. He knew his life was nearing its end. And he challenged them one more time. He says, look, you need to fear the Lord. Man, you need to stand in awe of who he is. You need to respect him. There needs to be a reverence that leads to obedience. And I think sometimes in today's culture, we miss that. That we think that we can do what we want and God will forgive us. Well, that's true, but it's like with my relationship with my parents or with my spouse that, man, I love them and I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to do anything to hurt Tina. Why? Because I love her. Therefore, I want to honor her with my life. It's the same thing with the Lord. I don't do what I necessarily want to do. I want to do what's pleasing to him, because of my love relationship with them. And I think maybe we've lost that a little bit in our culture, but it's a reverence that leads to obedience and a life that honors him. He says, look, you need to serve him with sincerity and truth. You know that's the right thing to do. So with all your heart, with a divine purpose, serve the Lord and serve people because you really do love him. And that service begins to be an overflow of that love relationship. Last time we talked about, he says, look, there's some stuff's got to go. That there needs to be an inspection of who's really on the throne of your heart. He says, look, guys, he says, man, your forefathers have passed on to you some little gods. They have chosen to serve little gods of the Amorites and across beyond the river. And you've got to decide, you've got to remove that stuff if you're really going to serve the Lord. So I want to read you verse 15 again and make a couple of comments from this verse today. In verse 15, Joshua says if it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourself today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which are beyond the river, or the God of the Amorites in whose land you live. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Just a couple of things about that. He starts that verse off with saying, look, if this is disagreeable in your sight, he says, look, some of you may not agree with me, but I'm going to serve the Lord. And what that speaks to me is this, and I think what we see is that Joshua had decided that what other people did was not going to affect his decision. He had made a decision that for him and for his house, that they were going to serve the Lord. And what the people chose to do, he desperately wanted for them to choose. But their decision was not going to affect his decision. His mind was made up. His heart was set that he was going to serve the Lord. How many times in our life do we let what people around us decide affect our decision? We need to take a stand. We need to decide now that we are going to serve the Lord regardless of what other people do. I was in conversation with someone yesterday that said that their child had heard me share from this passage of scripture at an event, and said that I kept saying, now is the time for you to decide. Not what other people decide, but you need to decide. And he said that their child put their faith in Jesus that weekend, had been baptized recently because they began to realize God was speaking to their heart that now is the time for you to decide. Folks, listen to me. Other people influence us, but we need to make a decision. And that decision needs to be, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It's time for you to decide and not let other people influence your decision. And then Joshua makes this statement, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. As for me and my house, Joshua made a decision for himself, but also for his household. He was leading his household to serve the Lord, to make a conscious decision to serve the Lord. And guys, that's what we need to do. We've been called to be the spiritual leaders of our home. We have not been called to be the spiritual dictators of our home, but we've been called to be the spiritual leaders, and we need to lead our families well. We need to be the one to lead our families in deciding that as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord, that we're going to fear Him, we're going to reverence Him, we're going to honor Him, we're going to live our lives in obedience to Him, we're going to serve Him because we love Him, we're going to serve people because He's given us a love for people, and we're going to do it in sincerity and in truth. And we need to set the example. I need to be the one that says on Saturday night, that Sunday morning we're getting up, we're going to Sunday school, we're going to be a part of a small group, we're going to worship. I need to lead in that. We're going to be a part of disciple-making group. I need to lead in that. I need to set the example in that. Why? Because God has given me the privilege and God has given me the responsibility to lead my family, and I want to lead my family well. I want them to look at me and say, there's one thing I can say about the leader of my family. There's one thing I can say about my dad. There's one thing I can say about my granddad. There's one thing I can say about my husband. There's one thing I can say about my uncle, is that he loved the Lord and he served the Lord because he loved the Lord. I want to lead my family well. Guys, I want you to listen to me. What an awesome privilege that we have. What an awesome responsibility that we have to lead our families to serve the Lord out of a love relationship with Him. Joshua says, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. May you say that. And he says, look, you may disagree with me. And if you do, your disagreement with me is not going to affect my decision. Man, let's lead well. Let's lead our families to fear the Lord, to serve the Lord with sincerity and truth, to put away false idols and false gods, and to serve Him because we love Him. I hope you have a blessed day. Go let Jesus be Jesus in you today, and decide that as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Thank you so much for watching Complete in Christ as we strive to teach you about the Christ life. And we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and may you have a blessed day walking with Jesus.